Okay, we're good to go. People will be logging in still little by little. We're already 14 on board, so I thank everybody that is here with us already now. Welcome to the 4th edition of the analysis of the value chain of precious minerals. And today we have the spotlight on Zimbabwe. And I'll just take the opportunity to introduce Chengi, who is the founder of OWIT Zimbabwe, and let her introduce herself and OWIT Zimbabwe before we go directly into the topic with the presentation of our honored speakers and then all of the spicy questions we have for them. So Chengi, the floor is yours. I need you to unmute. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chengi Ndlovu. You can call me Chengi for short. Those who are from Zimbabwe know that all these Chengisiwes are called Chengi. So it's actually to make it easy because it can be a mouthful for some who are not familiar with our language. First and foremost, I would like to thank OWIT Brussels for this great collaboration that seeks to actually put our country on the map in terms of mining. And Zimbabwe is also one of the mining giants, if I may put it that way. And today's webinar, I think, will do a lot to unpack all of that. Anyway, my task is to tell you more about OWIT Zimbabwe. I'm the founder of OWIT Zimbabwe, and OWIT Zimbabwe was established in 2019, in October 2019. I'm the founder and the first president. And after that, it has evolved. It has had, we've had 3 presidents after me, and the current president is Buhle Nyati. And what OWIT has been doing in Zimbabwe is to actually talk to our women, especially our women traders, our professionals, all the grassroots women, grassroots organization about international trade, identifying trade barriers in order for them to be able to participate in international trade. You'll also be pleased that OWIT Zimbabwe also took upon itself as an organization to join the government in sensitization and creating awareness about the Africa Continent Free Trade Agreement, of which we see also our minerals playing a crucial role in as far as trade is concerned. I think for now, I hand back to you to OWIT Brussels, and Jennifer, over to you, unless if there are questions.
Thank you very much. And anybody that wants to join OWIT Zimbabwe, you know where to find now. Chengi and Veronica, that will be on the panel as well, is part of OWIT Zimbabwe as well. So I would like to introduce our first honored speaker, Ms. Nomasiko Mpofu, who is a distinguished geoscientist and geology lecturer with extensive expertise in gemology and gemstone mining. She holds advanced qualifications in geological information system, shortly said GIS, which she leverages to analyze spatial data and manage geological information effectively. Nomasiko has significant hands-on experience in evaluating gemstones quality and conducting field assessment for gemstone deposits and ensuring sustainable mining practices, which means that Nomasiko is really what we can call a woman in the value chain of precious minerals. And then we will follow on with Ms. Laone Ntaga Echabetswe. Did I say that right? I hope. And you are a chartered development finance analyst with 11 years of experience in banking and finance, particularly in emerging markets. You specialize in investment analysis, risk management, and financial policy formulation with a strong focus on promoting the economic participation of women in a male-dominated industry in Africa, or in male-dominated industries, because it's not only one. And in your current role as an investment officer at the Trade and Development Bank, you mobilize finances to support high-impact sectors, including mining, green energy, and infrastructure. And your leadership extends beyond finance, as you have co-founded Bellona Women's Network and Easy Exchange, platforms focused on equity and financial inclusion for women. I hope you all noted that. Bellona Women's Network and Easy Exchange are the names. I'll add them when we send the resumes out. And then the next speaker that I will present is what we call Mr. Martin January, who is a seasoned mining professional with over 20 years of experience in the mining industry, particularly known for his work in the precious metals and gemstone sectors. I'll just ask everybody else to maybe mute the mic if you can hear you have background noise. Martin, you hold a prestigious position as the training and operations manager at the Zimbabwe School of Mines, where you've made a significant contribution to gender inclusivity by spearheading training programs specifically targeted at women in the artisanal and small-scale mining sector. You have played a pivotal role in the gemstone industry, introducing educational programs such as Diploma in Gemology and Certificate in Cutting and Polishing, and overseeing the commissioning of the lapidary workshop. You're currently leading the establishment of a jewelry manufacturing center, further integrating women into the gemstone and jewelry sector, and your efforts have positioned you as a key figure in promoting gender equality within the mining industry. And I think there are a lot of other countries and chapters that we've discussed with who could get inspired by what has been done around your efforts. And last but not least, I would like to present you Ms. Veronica Mzuze, who today will represent OWIT Zimbabwe because she's part of the team. And she will share with us her expertise in as a World Customs Organization accredited expert and master trainer for rules of origin. Veronica, you're as well a seasoned customs and international trade consultant with over 28 years of extensive knowledge in customs and international trade. And you are our contact for any training on VAT management, rules of origin, custom control, and valuation. And you have been actively involved in policy formulation for both imports and exports, including those related to minerals. So Veronica is our lady when we need to see how to export more cheaply and pay less VAT when we get our goods over the border. And I will directly dig into my first question, which is addressed to you, Nomasiko, on how do you see gender disparities affecting students' access to fieldwork and practical training, particularly in the mining and gemstone extraction? The floor is yours.
Okay, so hi. Yes, sorry about that. My name is Nomasiko, and thank you for the introduction. So what you are going to realize is that the geosciences field is a field that is mainly male-dominated. And then specifically in the precious and semi-precious stones industry, there are certain myths that are cultural that come with the mining that then set barriers for women to even join the field. Recently, we were part of an excursion when we went to the Mommy fields in Karoi, and we're told that even currently till date, women cannot go underground when it's during their menstrual cycle because it's believed that it brings bad luck to the mining operation. So you'll find that currently there are still certain myths that need to be gone past, or people need to be taught or made aware that these things are not real, and then this then acts as barriers for women to basically join the industry. But besides that, you'll find that geoscience is a very expensive field to join, because as students need to join to study it in schools, it tends to take a lot of money. And then because of the background of the families, most families are not willing to invest in the girl child. There's still a bit of that belief that the boy child is still more important. But as Zimbabwe School of Mines, it's one thing that I think as a school we're trying to break a barrier to, because even our intake of female students in the past 10 years has changed from 10% to 30%. So there's nothing directly that the curriculum can really be molded to fit the female student in, because there's nothing wrong with the curriculum. The curriculum can be done by whoever, whether you're female or you're male. You can still practice as a geoscientist or as a gemologist. What then the school realized needed to be done is to change the mindset of the people. So what we do when we do career fairs, we tend to send women who are in the field so that we can inspire the young girl to realize that it's possible that if someone who's female and who's young is doing it, then they understand that it's something that can be done. So the program itself, the design of the curriculum that we have at ZSM has been structured such that it encourages hands-on practices for the student, because I believe, or as a geoscientist, we believe that the key component of a geoscientist is your eye, because your eye is your biggest asset. So because we want to create gemologists and geoscientists who are very good at mineral identification, who are good at exploration, so the curriculum is structured such that it's a hands-on curriculum. And we do this, number one, by making sure that our educational programs are not just teaching in class, like whereby you just lecture. We actually include a lot of field work for our students, where our students actually go out into the field. And as we take them to the field, we're also aware that our country is still a developing country. So we take them both to the mining powerhouses, which are doing formal mining, and we also take them to the small-scale mining and the artisanal miners, so that they can be inspired to want to be entrepreneurs and to understand the challenges they might face if they become entrepreneurs in the particular field. And then besides that, when it comes to the weighting of our marks, we also ensure that the practicals weigh more than anything else. So we've got more weightage on our practical component compared to anything else, encouraging our students to then come out as hands-on practitioners that we can actually pour back into the industry, knowing that these guys can positively do mineral identification, they can do exploration, and they become more useful in actually fitting into our economic growth. So that's what ZSM have been doing.
So technically it is accessible to anybody, but the cost and the difference, let's say also the time that it can consume can be a barrier between girls and men. Did I understand right on that point? Okay.
Yes.
And the myth and the belief, and I also imagine that sometimes more money is put into a male student than a female student. Does that happen? That the families will invest more on men than women? Okay. And then,
yes, most definitely.
but I like the fact that you bring them, to the field, and also to like big mining, small mining, and also that they can see that this is possible. I think we all need to see what's possible to believe it's possible. And
Yes.
now, when we come to, you spoke about the artisanal miners, and I guess that there are many that work in a non-formal, let's say, way. And do you see any barriers between women and men that are differentiating from passing from informal mining to formal mining?
Okay, so when it comes to specifically the semi-precious stones industry, the colored gemstones, you'd find that it's a market that is mainly fed by the artisanal miner. So it's characterized by seasonal mining, whereby you find that most of our deposits are in Karoi and areas around Chirezi. These are farming regions. So what it means is that mining takes place only seasonally when the farming season is not kicking off. So you find that women who then are trying to provide for their families, try to then, when the season is a bit dry, they then try to compensate for whatever earnings they need to make by joining the mining industry. So when they do this, it's like they're doing hand to mouth. So in as much as they might want to grow as miners, they can't, because as soon as the rains come back, they need to go back to the fields because they're simply trying to fend for their families. And then currently with the colored gemstone industry, it's actually largely dominated by women. So you'd find that most women are the ones that are carrying out the mining, to a point that currently, when you go to Karoi, there's an interesting mine known as Zimbabwe Aquamarine Mine. I think that's what it's short for. So Zimbabwe was a mine which was established in 2019. And the interesting thing about Zimbabwe is that it mainly has 100% workforce of female workers. So it was done to then promote the seasonal miner who is female, who wants to venture into mining full time. but does not have the capacity, because mining really is a capital intensive
activity. Yeah.
money. They need yes. Okay.
You cut
So
it, but
you realize,
yeah. You're back. Sorry,
okay,
I interrupt.
you can now hear me.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the artisanal and small scale miners, the women have then been lacking financial access. And then the other thing, when I once interacted with the Chiwezi community, so they're saying that besides the funds, there are certain things that they don't know when it comes to lack of knowledge, where they do not know how to characterize their deposits, because we find that our deposits, mainly for gemstones in Zimbabwe, there are two types, mainly in orogenic belts, and some of them are in pegmatitic deposits. So these people are people that don't have a geoscience background. These are just ordinary women who are trying to make a living. So characterization of their deposits becomes something which is very difficult for them. And then number two, valuation of their own products. So you'd find that there are times whereby they can't even value a stone to say this aquamarine is of a good quality or of a bad quality. So what it means is that since they are artisanal miners, they're not formalized. They don't have access to the legal market. So they have to sell to the illegal buyer. This illegal buyer takes advantage that this person doesn't know how to value their stone. So they're going to buy the stones at ridiculous prices. They value down the stone, and then these people are trying to make a living. It's hand to mouth. So they are forced to sell to whoever comes first and offers readily available cash. So that is one thing that they complained about, that they do not really know what to look at as they value their product. And then number two, they don't really have the capital to even grow their artisanal small scale mining, to even small to medium scale mines. So what then has been done so far, it's not something that has been ignored. You've got people like Zimbabwe Miners Federation going into these places like Chiwezi and Karoi, and what they've been doing to these rural villagers is that they put together women and they've been assisting them with legalizing or formalizing their mining operations. So the first step to formalizing is registration of their title deeds. So what they've done, because it's very expensive, they've then clustered them into groups to say, how about you work as a group of women and you do what you call joint ventures. So when they do that, at least they are now formalized. Once they are formalized, they now have access to the NMCZ for trade, right? But they still have the barrier, which is the knowledge gap. And the knowledge gap, this is where the TSM comes in, and we now need to be the training operators. You would find that so far, we've successfully trained one group from Karoi, where we had female miners from Karoi in partnership with NMCZ. We were training them on gemstone cutting and on the identification and valuation. Yeah. So the second thing now that the institution has done is that we said we are going to teach them how to identify their stones, how to value, to evaluate them. But we also want to do something that the country really lacks, which is value addition. So talking about cutting and polishing. So the school has then said, okay, let's teach these women how to also cut and polish their stones, so that when they now sell them to the second buyer, they now go at what? At a higher price. So that's what the school has really tried, and we've had one successful group. So hopefully as the years come by, we're going to have more groups that we manage to train.
Yeah, that's great. So actually most women in mining today, like informal mining at least, they do it more on an opportunistic mindset of filling in a certain season, which is, I suppose, the non-rainy season. And then in the rainy season, they have another activity, maybe tied to agriculture or textile or whatever else they do. And so this is maybe also a reason why they don't think about formalizing what they do, because as it becomes an extra activity. If I catch it right, I reformulate always to make sure that I quote it right, so I can make some sort of takeaway at the end also. But now we have also Laone afterwards for the financial side. So it's very good to hear that there's this side that is necessary. And of course, cash can do a lot of difference, but cash that is invested without a whole view on, how do you say, a business model that becomes autosufficient at the moment, loses the impact that it could have. It becomes one shot. So I'm happy to see that, for example, the projects that were made, and it was with ZIMBABWE that this first project was made, if I'm not mistaken, to actually help them legalize and formalize their activities correct? Yes. And then what's missing now is the knowledge and valuation of their stones. And I really have heard that also before, that being able to evaluate what you sell, it's also existing in the agriculture to have these kind of issues. Now, the advantage of stones is that they don't perish. When you have food, you sometimes have perishable. With the stones, if they were able to keep them safe, now maybe some buyers who are online will say, no, don't say anything. But somehow they would be able to, go with when the demand is higher, keep their stones for when, manage that a bit more. So, okay, good. I'm very happy to hear that there are some already starting projects that somehow give fruit, that is very clear what's missing. And maybe here also, I hope that there are some that listen in who are specialized in also evaluating what the brands want as cuts. Because if you add value, you identify the stones, but you cut them. What we see being in Belgium is that often companies recut the stones because they were not cut as they were expecting. The quality was not, the stone quality is there, but the cut or the polishing is not there yet. So getting to all that, to a product that is really ready for the big brands or a mama papa store, it can be also that, but that quality is actually the aim, so that the added value keeps a bit more in the local countries of production. So I'm grateful for this input. I will have a common question for all of you, which is a bit how the universities, research institutions, private sector can all work together. But I think we'll take it at the end because it really will touch all of you instead of taking it individually. And I will jump to our next speaker, who is Martin January. And what I would like to ask you is to know, from your perspective, what are the primary skills gap in the mining and gemstone sector in Zimbabwe? And how do these gaps impact men and women differently? Because in the end here, we're talking gender differences, but not like only women or only men. And also maybe the strategies that can be implemented to enhance the female participation. Martin, the floor is yours. Where are you? Can't see
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me on this important discussion. Well, the gemstone sector has been underexploited in Zimbabwe, and the discussion, especially on the development of human capital, started a few years back. Remember, Zimbabwe had diamonds from the likes of Mrowa Diamonds and River Range. Then diamonds were also found in the Chiadzo area. But historically, gemstones have always been there, and people have been always working on that sector. But it is a depressed sector. The unfortunate thing is we didn't have trainings in that area. So no one was being trained in gemstones. No one was being trained in diamonds processing. So the whole value chain was not there, other than the mining and possibly grading. In terms of women participation, like what Nomasiko highlighted in a presentation, to say, yes, in the colored gemstone sector, especially in areas like Karoi, Chiredzi, I would want also to add Wange and Cholocho in that vein as well. There are a lot of gemstones in Zimbabwe, and women usually are the ones that go out there in the small scale mining sector and get the gemstones so that they sell the gemstones and fend for their kids. So what we have realized is that there's a gap in valuing of the stones. They do not know how much the stones that they are selling are worth. So that is the one key area. Across the whole value chain, we are saying we don't have the technical skills in terms of one valuing the stones so that you can properly trade them with the correct amount of the correct value so that it's realized. Then there's the second part, which is the value addition and beneficiation part, where you are adding value to the stones by cutting and polishing them. I would want to give you an example to say clear quartz in general is bought at around $50 a kg. So when it's eventually cut and it's set out in jewelry, a small piece which is less than 20 grams, 10 grams is going for around $30-40. So all those issues, they are there. So on the value chain, you need to be able to identify value and eventually make jewelry from in this sector, so that we say we have got a wholesome sector. So currently, in technical skills, I would want to say we have got a serious gap in terms of technical skills. Is Nomasik highlighted in a presentation to say, even as a school, although we have got we have a deliberate policy to say we need a minimum of at least a 30% participation of women in the industry, even on our enrollment. That's what it reflects. But however, our goal is to get to 50%, 50% both genders. However, there is a stereotype to say the mining industry is for men. So that is also the challenge that we have. The other issues I think are to do with your health and safety knowledge. We also need to see to make women aware on health and safety issues. Then the regulatory knowledge to say, how do we formalize and do things properly? And what does it mean to get a title for you to have for you to be able to mine gemstones? And also, how do you set up a lapidary workshop? How do you come on board and make sure that you are able to make jewelry that you are able to sell? And what are the other challenges in terms of buying stones? What do the regulators say about buying stones? So the regulatory space is also something that that is lacking, and that is also making the women resort to selling the stones through informal sectors, other than and not realizing the correct value of their stones. And the other most important thing, I think, is a provision of management and leadership training, and also making sure that there's entrepreneurial skills that are imparted to these women. And it's a whole approach which needs to be done. Because most of the women that are also involved in this are in the rural sector and who have had limited knowledge in doing that. Then the other key thing is generally in society, we have seen that most leadership roles go to men because of societal norms. But I would say that a lot of capable women who are capable to lead, and some doing much better than men. But it's the perception that should come in, and that we should do, that we should change.
Okay, so it's more, let's say, it's more cultural, or yes, cultural barriers or habits that infringe women by themselves. They can be auto-sabotaging their own capacity by believing that they are not able to reach these kind of functions. But if I understand right, the entrepreneurial skills, of course, actually, it makes sense. How can you value what you sell without the entrepreneurial mindset of making a business out of this and not just a sales in itself? Now, I have a question. If you think in Europe, we see always women pricing their services or things lower than men. It is something also cultural or instinctive. Do you feel that women sell for equal gem, a woman would sell it cheaper than a man would sell it?
From my observation, currently, it's those, because we are looking at this from the mine to market. So those that are at the primary source of extraction, those women that have got the stones from the mines, usually they are doing that because of survival. So they need to go to sell the stones so that they are able to fend for their families. So there is always a challenge to say they need to quickly sell and buy food or pay school fees or something like that. So
Okay.
that is a challenge that is there. If there is also a formalized market to say, once you get your stones, these you can go and sell your stones after being valued, and you get a fair value. So that setup is not there. However, I would also want to add that over the years we have worked with some miners, and in the women in miners in the precious sector. A few years back, we trained a group which came, especially in the gold mining sector, women, all women, and it's called Bobby, Women in Mining, and they are doing quite well. The plant and everything is run by women. And we also have got Nomtandazo that we have also trained in the extractive sector. They are also doing quite well. And if we would have an opportunity next time, we can invite them so that they talk on their own. Then we've got the Women in Gemstone Association of Zimbabwe. They've come in with the various partners with the Mines and Minerals Marketing Corporations of Zimbabwe. It sponsored a training for them in cutting and polishing. So the course allows them to be able to value the stones, grade them, and cut them. We would have wanted to do the training longer with them, but we only managed to do a 10-day course. But they really appreciated how the stones change as they are done. Then we've also had a non-governmental organization, Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association. They are also sponsoring women in the gemstone sector with the regular trainings and all of that. Then we are also training girls or women from disadvantaged societies through the Zimbabwe Health Initiative Trust. And so far we've trained about 150 in the last 3 years. And these girls, they go back to their communities, and because they're coming from mining communities, then they are able to do things properly and impact on their societies. So it's not exactly on the gemstones. On the gemstones, we've got the Minerals Marketing Corporation of Zimbabwe and the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association that have come on board to support the training. So the women are there.
Yeah.
But we hope that with the time going, with time, we would have more women participating in the gemstone sector. Unfortunately, the challenges that we are facing is we recently commissioned a lapidary center. This is all practical where someone can do your practicals, and we've also started training in gemology. But setting up these systems are also highly capital intensive, and for training purposes. But there's also because what we've said, we're training in terms of cutting and polishing. However, what we want to do is, because the sector is not developed, what we want to do is to say, after having been trained in gemology, cutting and polishing, what do we do? So we want to bring these people on board, provide them an incubation to say, for this duration of the period, for 6 months, you will be in the laboratory, in the workshop at the school. You learn and perfect your skills. After learning and perfecting your skills, then we set you up as a team, maybe a team of 2 or 3. We set you up as a business, and we make sure that we support you with knowledge and markets and all that, and support until you are in business. So that is the concept, the overall concept that we're working with. So we believe that in the few years that is coming, we want to decentralize, because it's also very difficult to say the main players that we have are women, and you want to, right now we're located in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. We want to move to have them coming to train to the school from Karoi, which is about 600, 700 kilometers away. So it's important that we decentralize. We have equipment on the ground so that they are able to evaluate their stones on their own after they've been trained, and they sell the products knowing the exact value for what they are doing.
But that's actually a super rebouncing to Laone, because we have Laone on our speaker list. And if I saw right, and afterwards I'd like to ask you, Martin, to list me up all the initiatives that have been financed and that are accessible to women, specifically in the mining sector and in the rest of the value chain, because you listed quite a lot, at least 4 or 5 of them. And I think that many of our listeners will be happy to be able to look into that. And I also see that, as you say, creating these incubators, and I like the fact that you're creating an incubator with, with the follow-up afterwards, with the fact of launching them also on the business side. And somehow it can also be an added value for the incubator, that they can afterwards show how they managed to become an entrepreneur, thanks to the education, the training and management, the setup of a business in small teams, and all this added value they will be able to repercute on other women and men around them. And if I may introduce and bring us in Laone, because you are our financial expert in development finances. And I guess that a lot of these projects are still financed by development financial access, or let's say funds, whereas we would like them to be autosufficient one day, that it self-feeds. But maybe you could tell us a bit from your experience, what are the main barriers preventing women from accessing these development finances in Zimbabwe's precious stones and mineral sector? Because now we've seen that there are some initiatives, at least, to educate them. But what prevents them themselves from accessing these finances in Zimbabwe's mineral sector? And maybe I'd add the second question to that is, like, what do you think are the social cultural norms that impact women's ability to access finances in the precious stones and mining sector? And I guess you will maybe underline that it is the management, but maybe not. So the floor is yours on that. And thank you, Martin. And actually, I think we would nearly have to have the case study of that you mentioned, of the groups that have done well. And this is really nice. I think role models are important, and that we can showcase them, which show others that it's possible. But now I'll go to Laone, because else I'll go over time.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and lovely to have everybody online today to discuss this very important issue. So I think Nomasiko and Martin really spoke to some of the challenges that we face as financiers when we try to ensure that we participate in some of these sectors, to ensure that we crowd in women. Now, one thing that Nomasiko mentioned that's a key barrier to women accessing finance is really lack of formalization. So as a financial institution, I want to know who I'm lending money to and what I'm lending money for. So when we have institutions or people that would like to get access to finance that are not registered, this really prevents them from accessing any form of finance, because any financier really wants to ensure that whatever money that they give out is actually going to come back. Because remember, financial institutions are intermediaries. We lend other people's money. So I'm sure, Jennifer, if you've invested or deposited your money in my bank, you want to ensure that at the end of the day, as a bank, we lend it out responsibly. So according to the Zimbabwe Miners Federation, 84% of women artisanal miners are still unregistered. So this means that this really limits the ability to get access to finance. So we need to really push and encourage that women who are in this space actually register their companies. We also need to ensure that these companies are functioning in a sustainable way. I think one thing that Nomasiko mentioned is that a lot of women in the informal sector still perceive their business as something that they can, do when it's appropriate, and then when the agricultural season comes on, they leave it for something that's more lucrative in that season. So as a financier, we want to see that income is consistent and sustainable over a long period of time, because we want to ensure that whatever money is lent out, the beneficiary can be able to pay back that money over time. So lack of formalization is really one of the key barriers in this sector that's preventing women to get access to finance. The second thing that Martin actually touched on a bit is the issue of business records and governance structures. Now, I think anybody who lends money to even a friend, you want to know that that friend has a history of paying back, other people that they've borrowed money from. So lack of records, lack of credit histories are also some of the key barriers that prevent women from being able to access finance. So if these women are unable to, value the gems that they're selling, that probably means there's no bookkeeping involved in, when the sales are made. And this is something that could actually de-risk a transaction when a lender looks to finance in this particular industry. So one key thing that women can do, or educators can do, or people that are supporting business development in this space, is to encourage record keeping, is to encourage women to start building up a credit history to ensure that when they do want to get access to finance, whether it's from a commercial bank, whether it's from a development bank, or access to other funds, there's actually a track record of their sales that they've been able to sell, whether it is in the formal market or the informal market. It's important that there's some sort of record that shows that, there is actually a product that's being produced that has a potential to be sold. Because the only way that revenue can be generated is when there's a product and there is a sale. So business records are also one of the things that are quite critical in ensuring that we ensure that women are crowded in when it comes to access to finance. And then also, Nomasiku touched on this, access to training and technical expertise. So when a financial institution looks to lend, they do not only lend to the company, but they also lend to the person behind the company. So it's important that although these women have acquired the skill to do the mining, whether it's skill that has been acquired formally or informally, there needs to be a way of demonstrating the skill. So this might be, the training institutions ensuring that for whatever trainings or interventions that are being brought forth, there's maybe a certificate, or there's a way that people that participate in that training can actually demonstrate their skill to somebody in an objective way. So this is something that lenders also look at. Is this person equipped to do the business that they're doing? I mean, I could easily, try to be a chef, but if I don't cook good food, then somebody that lends money to me is not really sure if my shop will be open the next day. So demonstrating these skills and documenting them is actually very important. And not only the practical skill, but also the technical skills. I think as we also discussed, mining is a very capex heavy, sector. So there are constantly new machinery coming online, more efficient ways of doing things. So in terms of getting access to finance, I want to know that I'm financing a business that will be here 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now. And that also implies that those businesses need to be, relevant and up to date with the latest machinery, the latest mining equipment and trends. And, I don't know if there are new ways of cutting and polishing. What are the off-takers or the people that you're supplying to? What are they looking for? I think one thing that has come online quite heavily recently when it comes to precious stones and mining in general is traceability. Is there a way that maybe not as individuals, these miners are able to tap into ways they can certify their products, or they can ensure that there's some traceability in terms of where these products are coming from? And on the point of traceability, I think also globally, ESG issues have come to the forefront. So we're not only concerned that women can actually get the product out of the ground, we're concerned about environmental degradation. We're concerned about contamination of water sources. We're concerned about, the living and working conditions on those mining sites. Is the health and safety intact? Because as a financial institution, we also care a lot about reputational risk. We don't want to be found that, the financing that was provided has led to, a hub of sexual and physical abuse for women, or, their deaths in those mines and so forth. So ESG is also one of the issues that I hope that also the educators, in addition to the skill, they're also training entrepreneurs to look more beyond just the day-to-day of the business itself, but also strengthening the governance, the ESG, and the risk management of those sites, because these are key elements that, as financiers, we would look to ensure that we give women access to finance.
Yeah.
So generally, I would say that the reason why women perhaps are left behind in terms of accessing finance as well is not only because, you know, financiers don't prefer women, but these are more related to the structural issues or structural differences in the businesses that women run versus the businesses that men run. For example, structural differences of size. I mean, typically men would run bigger mining operations because I think, just Jennifer, as you touched on, there's societal issues that hinder women from getting access to capital, access to collateral, which in turn stifles how much they're able to, you know, get access to capital. So the sizes of the businesses are different, and the different sizes obviously means that they have lesser avenues of getting access to finance. So the bigger the business, the more you not only get access to finance maybe through a fund, but you can also approach a commercial bank, or you can approach bigger organizations like development institutions as well. We also have issues of just the nuances of the mining industry itself. I think Martin spoke to the fact that still mining is considered as a male-dominated industry. So these are still nuances that we actually don't find that many strong and properly set up female businesses in this industry, and more concentrated in the informal sector.
But yeah.
Yes, Jennifer, you can come in.
I have a comment on that. Is that there are various things I wanted to go back to, of course, traceability, because it's of my interest somehow, but sometimes I feel that the financial sector has structured its KPIs on, or let's say its evaluation on what a sustainable business is, on quite binary and financial aspects. But we see, and I'm a teaser here, I'm a bit the how do you say, the devil's advocate. But sometimes I notice that women-led businesses are somehow more 360 degrees inclusive, and more environmentally friendly, and more sustainable at the social level, but that the financial institutions as of today, for example, mentioning the ESG elements, they're not taken into consideration sufficiently. And when we talk about risk management, we will talk about the risk of the reimbursement, but sometimes we don't notice that a big structured mine maybe might be more polluting and be more costly for the country as a piece of the earth. It's more viable economically, but it's less viable on the long term, and let's say on the sustainability. This is just a bit of my opinion on that.
100%, Jessica. Jennifer, sorry. I think we're on the same page with regards to that. I think earlier I alluded to the fact that as women and women businesses, we need to tell our story better. So if, you know, this impact is actually not having as much degradation, or we're actually hiring more people, and, you know, the financing that's been deployed into those organizations goes a longer way than financing that's perhaps given to a male business. I think it still goes back to the point of documentation. Do we have the data to back up what it is we're saying? When you do approach a financial institution, do you have, you know, a presentation that highlights some of this impact that you've had in your community? Do you have a presentation to say, you know, this is how much my business emits in terms of, you know, greenhouse gases, in terms of pollution, or the savings that are associated to that? So I think as women, we just need to tell our story better.
We need to take our story from a story to a numbers story, and put some more faith into it. I guess that's it. But then I'll come, just before I'll jump in with Veronica, and we'll go maybe 5-10 minutes over time if everybody agrees and is okay to stay online. But just to say, you know, in the cocoa industry, and what we're looking at with the traceability is that of being able to go that last mile, where you are able to track and pay, mobile pay, on the first thing, if there is enough connectivity, or even on USSD connections, you know, without mobile smartphone, but also because you can track what the production of each farmer, and in this case, each miner, yielded, and you would be able to pay them a fair price, and trace all the way down to each mine, each person, see how much they earned, see their credit history, as you said. And even if some criteria could be logged in on the environmental, social, and governance, yes, these kind of tools are being implemented right now. The fear of companies like iTraceIt, which is what I represent when I don't represent OWIT, is that the small miners will be left behind because of the lack of access to this technology. So there's, and I'm sending that out as a lobbying to everybody that speaks with any organizations, that we don't have to forget the small miners.
I agree, Jennifer. And I love that you spoke to the fact that mobile payments are actually a key to unlocking access to finance for women. So not only in the aspect of traceability, but also this actually allows women to have an easy credit history. Yes. Because traditionally, we know that women don't have access to collateral. But when we start leveraging on platforms like mobile banking and mobile payments, we're able to then develop some sort of a credit history and credit reference systems that could possibly help us slowly do away with the traditional collateral de-risking mechanism that financing institutions typically use. So that's actually one way that could actually help women develop those credit histories and also be able to use whatever they have in terms of accessibility and the security that they would provide to the bank. I think we know that traditionally in Zimbabwe and a lot of other African countries, even though women perhaps don't have land, but women have goats, women have, other movable assets that they could use as collateral. And even we also have one system that is commonly known as Stockvel or group lending or cooperative. I think even elements such as, social collateral, like, I have this group of women that have known me for a long time. They can easily guarantee my loan. These are things that we already have inherently in our culture and in our way of saving and credit that could also be leveraged over and above the traditional financing mechanisms that we find to actually ensure that the way that we are conducting lending is actually relevant to the cultural context.
Okay, yes. I hope everybody noted down all the checkpoints that you'll have to access credits and access finances in a more safe way somehow as well. And as you said, the social collaterals, all the other elements, is true also that financials are often based on the capital that you already have, which was a male history that we have less than men often. And we actually see that in scoring systems, often women are better reimbursed. They give
better
back
payers.
And they give back the money better than men somehow. So, but I don't want to make a difference. It's just like things that statistically show up sometimes.
That's true.
I will be moving on to Veronica. Welcome, Veronica. Sorry, we will go over time with you, but I think everybody will stay tuned. And now it's about how do we sell these goods and get them over the customs? And do you notice in your experience that male and female exporters of precious stones and minerals will navigate, let's say, Zimbabwe's export and customs regulations differently? And what are the specific challenges that are related more to women than men in this case?
Thank you, Jennifer, for that question. And I would like to confirm that international trade is a complicated field. And from my experience, I've noted that women, we tend to shy away from business entities that have complications. So you will see that mining in general is composed of the big multinationals, the big corporates, and women are sort of being carried on the back of the bigger guys, if I may put it that way. So in terms of the customs laws, there's no difference in how a male-owned entity and a female-owned entity is treated, because all the procedures and formalities are the same. And in the Zimbabwean context, we do not have sex disaggregated data to tell at the customs level which entity belongs to who. So as long as it's a registered business or corporate or an individual who is formally registered, they are allowed to export or import a certain product. So in terms of the procedures and the formalities, there is no difference. But generally, like I said in the beginning, women tend to shy away from certain forums, and especially women in cross-border trade. There is generally a lack of understanding of customs laws, because generally customs is complicated. So you will see that there is a fear to approach the officials and find out information which is pertinent to the business that one is doing. And particularly when it comes to trade of minerals, the values are high by nature of the product. For example, if I'm selling a gold bracelet, it's different from selling an ordinary bead bracelet. So the value generally would discourage women because they just have that fear, and in times they are told by other people out there that you cannot do it. Instead of them going to seek the correct information, they listen to those advisors and they believe we cannot do it because we are women. And you'll find that certain elements or unruly elements then take advantage. And they then purport to want to represent the woman. And in the process, women are exploited. So in terms of the challenges, mostly mining, like has been said before, requires huge capital investment. And for one to export precious minerals, semi-precious stones, the value that is required to purchase or to process is quite high. And for one to then export, the requirements also tend to go above the limits for what we can normally call informal traders. In that case, it means one has to go through the formal systems and sort of avoid the informal platforms that are in place by virtue of the value that is of the product that is being exported. So if one is going to export a value added or a polished stone, sorry, I might not use the correct terms, but a polished stone, the value would have appreciated by virtue of it being polished and not rough. So in that case, one has to get the permits, has to acquire the currency declaration forms from the banks, and seek authority from the Reserve Bank for export of that. And you'll find that now that woman has to go through these bureaucratic processes, which might take time. In the meantime, that woman is away from the mine, trying to organize all the formalities to export their product. Another time they're away from the mine, and you know the risks involved in trade of minerals. So most women would feel like, why don't we give it to the men? They can go away from the family for a week. They can go from office to office and acquire the necessary paperwork. Meanwhile, they lose out because that person who is now running will charge them a premium or will shortchange them in terms of the value of the product that they are exporting. And generally, those are some of the challenges that women encounter as they try to sell their products on the international arena. And maybe if I could also add, because customs is a technical subject that most people, even the bigger corporates, they don't quite understand. There is always a facility to use registered brokers or clearing agents who can be engaged and paid for the service to then do all the formalities for export. Unfortunately, it's an additional cost to the woman, especially where there's no financing, proper financing for the business. And it's easier when somebody then comes to the mine and buys the product directly. They seem to be reducing the inconveniences. But in the long term, or in other words, they're shortchanging the woman in terms of the value that they could get.
Actually, you make me... Yeah.
You can go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I wanted to say, well, now that we had Martin from the education side and what you said, I would love to see in some years that you can train and give education to the future gemologists and experts in evaluating the value of a stone, also on how to export it somehow, and what are the HS codes, what's the difference for exporting a rough stone from a cut stone, from polished stone. There must be different HS codes that give a different value, also to understand what's the strategy of export, because maybe you add value by cutting it, but you lose it by the import taxes in the country that you want to import to. On the other hand, these things are also important. What hurt my ears and hurt it and is global is the fact of the men can leave the home and go and do the paperwork, and they have the time to not be at home, take care of the kids. Actually, this could be the women as well, but I know that's cultural and it doesn't differ from any country in the world. Women who travel, women who leave the home too many hours will always be a bit blamed somehow, a bit of a bad consciousness if they're too far away from the kids. So that is a struggle that we cannot nearly get over, but maybe yes. But I was thinking when we talked about, the additional cost, it's an additional customs is an additional cost for women as it is for men. It doesn't really make a difference. If I heard right, the fact of sometimes going and looking for the information or needing to do the paperwork, and different countries have different ways, but sometimes to have your paper on the top of the pile and not staying on the bottom of the pile, you need to have other practices. And I've heard from other countries where when women came to these offices and they were good looking, let's say the bribery asked by them was more, let's say, on a natural investment than a financial investment towards these people. And this could be also a difficulty for women to go towards these institutions, because often it was male-dominated offices. So there, when I think about the customs, and I know customs are working on gender balance within the customs, there should somehow be offices that can advise and give the paperwork that are with more women functionaries or workers, so that women would not fear going asking for information to these offices because they would meet a woman in front of them. Would that make a difference, do you think? Just an opinion.
Definitely. If I could come in, Jennifer, definitely it would indeed make a difference. And in Zimbabwe, we do have platforms for sharing of such information. And obviously, Zimbabwe does not operate in a closed environment. So Zimbabwe, by virtue of being a member of the World Customs Organization, the World Trade Organization, SADC, COMESA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, there are platforms for sharing of information with women. And in particular, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, for example, has got a specific protocol for women and youth in trade. These are platforms that we are trying to put in place to include women in education and understanding platforms for that. In Zimbabwe, for example, we do have ZimTrade, ZIMRA, ITC, OWIT. They are there to help women. But I think I would want to encourage women also to seek the information. Once you are informed, you are empowered. Even when you go into that office, you can ask questions about why certain things are being done. So I would like to believe that in as much as women can be victims of corruption, but also even men, the difference is men are more confident and upfront, and they can challenge certain things. But women tend to be timid, and obviously the unruly elements then take advantage of that. So I would encourage women to continue lobbying and advocacy activities so that we continue to empower each other even if a woman comes into an office where there's another lady, you find that the way they ask the questions might not really answer what they are looking for. But they'll ask in a way, go around, and in the end, they go there not really informed. So platforms like this really help women in terms of empowering them with the necessary knowledge that they need to maneuver certain platforms, especially international trade, and how they can then sell their product. Who do they contact where that information is available? And there are people that have actually volunteered to share such information, not necessarily for a fee. So as women, it is critical that they seek the information in the right places. And in Zimbabwe, to encourage a level playing field, we have the gender policy. And our constitution also wants to ensure that women are taken on board. Our national development strategy encourages that we have everyone participate in building the economy. So sometimes I also believe that as women, we are not doing enough to have our space on the table. It's important for us to craft our way to the table. Why would we be on the table if we are not willing to contribute? I understand there are challenges here and there, but I think we also need to put in the effort rather than saying, you can go because you are the man, I'll stay at home. Because I think family upkeep is for both parents. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question,
No,
Jennifer.
you answered very well my question. And I think what I really hear also and triggered me is the responsibility of each one of us to actually go prepared, not victimize oneself. There are things that, yes, can be traumatizing, but there are things where you must lift up the head and you must, get your warrior cap on. We don't need to all be super women to manage, but I think our generation is a cleavage. We are a changing generation, so we need to be a bit more super women so that we do the curling for the next generation somehow. But we need to take that responsibility also on us, each one of us, to inform ourselves well, network, find solutions to make this happen and to get to this information. And I will ask, just as we wanted the case studies, there are some takeaways for afterwards. Maybe if we can list ZimTrade, OWIT, the different platforms that you mentioned, so that we can send them to the persons that listened in, and I'll send by mail. So anybody that registered through the formula, how do you say, through the form, I have their email, and if they agree, I can send this back. As we're quarter past, and I see we do have questions in the chat, but we are over time. So what I propose is what we also did with the first South African webinar, was to send our speakers the questions and have you do a bit of homework after this and get back with answers to these questions that we can send out together with the resume of today and the main takeaways. Would you all agree to that? Yes?
I don't have a problem with that.
Good. Thank you very much. So I think this session has been super informative. I loved that now at least some women in Zimbabwe will know where to learn more about gemology, learn more about jewelry, learn more how to get some of the technical skills, at least have a sense of what they would have to present to get access to finances, and also how to start exporting or how to manage to at least make it easier for their buyers in terms of exports. I loved also, Nomasiko, your knowledge and your, let's say, experience in this field gave a whole other dimension also to this, because I love to see a woman like you having reached the level of lecturer, and with the knowledge and with the geospatial data management that you're doing for is super interesting. I'll maybe hook up afterwards to get more on that as well. Though I hope to keep in touch with all of you. As you know, there is a WhatsApp group also. Maybe I'll take one question up, and anybody can send a mail about that, is what is the right value of a gemstone? Because in the end, we saw that the rough stone is very cheap. But when we add the knowledge of knowing the gemology, knowing how to export it, knowing how to manage the business behind it and create it and cut it, all these steps do add value. I do not think that the balance between when it's mined and when it sits on a big brand's jewelry piece is fair. Definitely not. But it would be nice to one day understand what is a fair value chain and where is the fair price for all in the end, because we cannot compare that end price with the mining price there. And we just saw it just internally to the country. There are so many steps that add value to it and that add costs to it and investments to it. So, and then afterwards, there'll be other traveling and cutting and trading is just seeing, let's reflect on what's the fair price for a stone or for gold coming out of the ground, plus the environmental and social impact it has on the community. Let's not forget that part. So with that, that's a bit my conclusion. I would like to thank all of our speakers, for you, Veronica, for you, Nomasiko, Laone, Martin, thank you very much. Thanks also to Paul Mazzona, who helped organize all this, and to all those who have been supporting. Thank you, Chengi, for introducing OWIT and founding OWIT Zimbabwe. And I am happy to see you on the next webinar. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laone.
Thank you everyone
Thank you.
for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
everyone.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank
But
you.
there's a question. Can I squeeze it in on the chat? Someone said we left out rural women. We're silent on rural women. Maybe next time, or not
We'll
even
take
next
that
time.
up.
It's just that the today's title just defined the parameters, but
Yes.
we have our chat.
And it's a long answer. That's why I didn't take it up. There are other questions as well. And I do like that of creating a whole economy around the women in the areas of mining with the whole community of what they do, agricultural, medical, maybe artisanal, and the mining. But we'll take that by written and maybe with the case studies that Martin mentioned before, that could be maybe a concrete with people on the field.
And maybe just to add that it could be a good reason to join OWIT as well, because all this information could be shared through the OWIT platforms.
Definitely.
Awesome.
And I've created a YouTube channel. I just have to figure out how to mount the videos, but they will be on it soon. Is my son doesn't put all his video games on it, because that might happen as well. I hope not. So that's it. Thank you to all of you. Have a nice afternoon, a brilliant afternoon, if I dare to say, in this context. And thank you very much for your time, your interest, and for all you do for all of us. Bye.
Bye.
Somebody is asking, what is the name?